Hey everyone, thanks for watching. I have a really special video for you today. I have my friend Tom Olson with me. How you doing today, Tom?
Pretty good. How you doing, Michael?
I'm doing very well. And the reason I think this show is going to be particularly interesting to you is a lot of the viewers and comments I get are from folks looking potentially to invest out of state. I've done a bunch of research on different markets and different turnkey providers, and one that I'm very fond of is one run by Tom and his team over there in Gary, Indiana. So I thought I'd get him on. We'd talk about that. We talk about his company because he has so many things going on. And that's why I thought we'd get on the call today. Is that okay, Tom?
Well, thanks for having me, Michael. I appreciate you getting up a little early because it's a little different time zone here in Northwest Indiana as it is in California where you're at there. Got to meet our mastermind last November. It was a great event, and I thought that you fit in really well with those people and really kind of. I'm not sure if it was you or somebody else that said the conversation was a little different level than what you're used to when you're talking to typical real estate entrepreneurs or people just kind of getting started out. So it was a really good time to meet you there, meet your wife, and just kind of be able to meet on a different level and talk. So that was pretty cool.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I had a great time. What you've built there and what I can see coming is why I reached out and was hoping we could do this. So why don't we start by talking with your vision? Because I really do think it's a vision for you about why flipping Geary is just makes sense. I forwarded you some news articles recently about Indiana being the top market in the country, and it's like you have a crystal ball, frankly. So why don't we just talk about what you see there? Why don't we start there, and then we'll go further. So what do you see there? Why does it make so much sense to you?
Well, I mean, I have two kind of main businesses. One is Good Success, which is the education company, which you kind of came a part of the mastermind with. And then we have another event in June that is called the Community Go-Giver event, which kind of I talk about my vision of flipping Gary and why I'm flipping Gary. And then the other core business is Olson Group, which is really, if you look at the core of what we really do, we build rental portfolios for investors. I mean, really, that's what Olson Group does, and that's why they exist. That's what we do. As far as me, I'm not sure how much you want to get into the story or not, but kind of how this whole thing came about is in 2008, I was living fine, making six figures, feeling like everything was great in life. And almost overnight, basically went from making six figures to 20 grand, like almost just instantly. And I found myself figuring out how can I get through this? And instead of maybe declaring bankruptcy, instead of kind of taking, what most people may take the easy route out, I said, hey, I can just move my family to Gary, Indiana. And it's not really where I'd want to live, but I felt like God was saying, hey, if you humble yourself, I will in due season, I'll come back for you. And during that time, I bought a house for $19,000 cash, put about $15,000 into it, 5-bedroom, 3-bath house, 2,700 square feet. What most people in most neighborhoods would think this is a great house, just really wasn't the best neighborhood. Lived there for about 2.5 years with my family. And during that time, I kind of feel like it wasn't, this isn't a vision that I have. This is kind of like a vision that was given to me, or this is a vision that has me. When I would see the people, and you have to understand, Gary, Indiana kind of went through 2 downturn cycles in the decade of the 2000 years, from 2000 to 2010, it actually had 2 downturns.
Wow.
And that doesn't normally happen. They normally talk to Eddie Wilson, talk to like some really smart data people, and they say real estate never comes in cycles twice, it never cycles twice, in a row. So that's why one of the reasons why I don't think we're really in a bubble. You may be in a bubble in California, but the most of the country is not in a bubble when it comes to real estate. And that's because, like, normally we don't have it twice in a row. We don't have a real estate crash twice in a row as far as economic downturn goes. But Gary actually had it twice in 1 decade. So in 2003, we had tax reform in the state of Indiana. And most of the houses in Gary, Indiana were taxed at about $800 a year. That was the tax. And, these houses were worth 50, 60, 70 grand. And, they were renting for 7, 6, 7, 8, 800-ish in that type of numbers. And, so back to the story, when I was living in Gary, I kind of just would keep seeing these people, and this was in 2008. So we had the 2003 tax reform, which made these houses go from $800 a month or $800 a year to like investors getting tax bills of like $10,000, which because it was a compilation of things. It was the mortgage companies didn't understand what tax bills were getting sent out. They were sending out 2 years in the rear. So they were like making you catch up on when they decided. It was kind of like, we're going to retroactive your tax bill back 2 years kind of deal. Wow. And then on top of that, the mortgage companies didn't understand that it was for a whole catch up bill. They thought it was like a new 6-month bill. So not only were people getting large tax bills, they were also, their mortgage payments were going from like $400 a month to like $1,200-1,300. And for a house that rents for $750, what do you think most investors are going to do? They're going to run for the hills. So that happened in 2003. And then if that wasn't bad enough, in 2007 and 2008, we had 2007 and 2008, as a national real estate crisis. So like the investors that didn't leave in 2003, 80-90% of them left. You had 80% of investors leave in 2003, and then you had another 80% of investors that left in 2008. And really, it's kind of been that way for the last 10 years. And I do a lot of traveling, a lot of speaking around the country, and I see how all these other neighborhoods in the whole country, areas in Dallas, for instance, that are like very dangerous to be in. And I've walked up and down these streets in Baltimore. Seriously. Sometimes you're afraid to walk up and down the streets in these cities, and those houses are going for like $100,000. And I'm like, this is a very unnatural. That's what I look for. I look for inefficiencies in the market, and it's a very inefficient market right here in Gary, Indiana, right next to Chicago. I mean, people, whenever I say I'm from Indiana, most people think I'm from Indianapolis. I don't understand why this, like, all of a sudden, this connection with all of Indiana is Indianapolis. It's not like Illinois. So Illinois, if you're from Illinois, 90% of the people that are from Illinois are from Chicago. Like that's how Illinois is. But Indiana, we're really spread out. There's a lot of different markets that have 500,000, 1 million people all around the state of Indiana. And Northwest Indiana is one of those markets. So there's 500,000 people in Lake County, Indiana. And my office is actually closer to downtown Chicago than either one of the Chicago airports. So to kind of put it into perspective. And so I get to compete. Northwest Indiana gets to compete with all the high rents that come out of Chicago, Illinois, because taxes in Illinois, for instance, on a single family rental property, the exact same houses that we have in Hammond and in Gary and in Maryville, that our taxes are about $2,400 a year, are like $6,500 a year in Illinois. So that's just one of the reasons why I think it's a great play. Not only that, Indiana is a very landlord friendly state. I can normally get a tenant out within 15, 20 days, from the time I need to get them out, where Cook County, Illinois can be 9 months if you have a good attorney. Oh, wow. And so all those things kind of puts together. Back to my story in 2008. And it was a very hard time in my life. It was a humbling time in my life, but I got to see people's eyes, and I got to see the kind of like the hopelessness that they have gone through. And for me, it's not about this vision to make money. It's about this vision to help the people and the city of Gary, Indiana, actually become a thriving metropolitan again, like it really was in the 1920s. You hear about the Jackson Five, you hear about all Gary, Indiana, Gary, Indiana, all these songs, from all those past movies and such. And it really was a thriving city at one time, and it could be again. And I think there's a lot of things that for me make sense, and I probably can't really explain them all on a short podcast like this. But if you just look at the numbers themselves, it's a completely unnatural market, and it's a place that I believe is going to. And I know like this is going to sound crazy, but it's a place that I believe it's right time, right place. And we're already seeing these spikes in prices already happening in Gary, Indiana. It's something that I kind of felt in 2008, 2009. I never told a single soul until 2012 that God had kind of given me this vision, or God had given me this burden to help the people and help the city of Gary. And I kind of regret that, honestly. I regret not opening my mouth. I regret not having the faith to actually step out in faith and say, hey, this is going to happen. Because I feel like as soon as we started doing that, we just start seeing things happen. It's like what you focus on expands, and sometimes those things that you focus on, and like you start getting the word out. And now we have an investors meeting, like I said, the community go-giver event every year. And this year, I actually think I'm going to have the mayor of Gary actually there at the event. And, I've been I wouldn't say close friends with her, but we do chat occasionally. And I just believe it's not about the money that you make. It's not about the properties. It's not about the rental properties. It's really about the people and the lives that you're affecting in the community that you're serving. And for me, like, that's what makes all the difference. And that's why I want to do what I want to do in Gary. I have this vision to flip the city of Gary. And to me, it doesn't mean like I'm going to flip every house. To me, it means like bring a whole new culture back to the city, and bring a culture of love and stewardship and prosperity and a neighborhood, building a community inside a community all over Gary, Indiana is pretty much kind of where my heart's at when it comes to flipping the city of Gary. And what I want to see is people moving back to the city, and kind of have people moving away from that city of Gary, and not really the county of Lake County. They've just been moving away from Gary to all the other cities and all the other towns around Gary, because Gary only has about 80,000 people. But you got Hammond right next door that has 80,000 people. You got Valparaiso. You got Maryville has 40,000. Crown Point has 60,000. You have all these little 40, 50, 60,000 towns right around Gary, Indiana. So Northwest Indiana kind of makes up its own little suburbia from Chicago. And it's just I like it. I really do. I mean, I know we get a little bit of cold weather up here, and I know people kind of complain about that a little bit. Being close to Chicago, sometimes, it will get, below zero. But right now, I don't know what is outside, Josh, 40 degrees. So it's not too bad.
Very cool.
So anyways, like, I hope that explains where you wanted me to go with that.
Yeah.
But for me, like, that's at the heart of the matter. And that's really why I do what I do.
Yeah, your why is very clear. It's you're very passionate about it. It comes through. The authenticity is awesome. I do want to go back and sort of pick apart one thing that you said that I think the viewers of this are really going to sort of go, what did he mean by that? And that's building rental portfolios for investors. So, take take your California investor where I happen to be sitting today, right? These high tech jobs, these stock options, they got lots of income, no time. Why don't we paint a vision for what you could do or what that might look like, if you don't mind?
Sure. So what I've been doing for the last 3.5 years is building people's rental portfolios outside of the city of Gary. So I do want to make that clear.
Sure.
3 years ago, I didn't feel myself that it was a prudent investment for the city of Gary. Today, I actually do. Today, I actually believe it's worth the risk. And even if nothing else happens, your appreciation, I believe, is going to be there. And I really firmly believe in that. We've had 3,600 jobs announced just in the city in the last 6 months. And for a town of 80,000, that's a lot of jobs. The culture is already starting to change. We're actually getting a Starbucks. There's things that are like happening that like you wouldn't have seen 3 or 5 years ago. But look, so let me, for the last 3 or 5 years, we've sold hundreds of turnkey rentals, or my active turnkey program. I think you have that book, Active Turnkey, in which we help investors. The active turnkey program is, I think, the best way to buy rentals. They buy a house that needs to be fixed. I wholesale the house to them. I have a construction management company that will then fix the house for them. And then I have a property management company that will manage for them on the back end. And then what I expect is people to come in with cash, and then they go and refinance, and they pull most of their money out. My average investor in the active turnkey program has $5,000 to $10,000 into a rental house instead of maybe 20 or 30 into their rental house when they're all said and done. So it's a little bit less cash in the deal, which makes their cash on cash return, if you're looking at it from how much investment they have in the deal, a lot greater. And it helps them recycle that same money. It does take a little bit more time. There are pros and cons to the active turnkey program versus a regular turnkey program. So the turnkey program really is like, I buy it, I fix it up, I rent it, I sell it, rented. And for us, the typical numbers outside of Gary. So let me kind of tell you what I've been doing, and then I can kind of give you the numbers of what Gary, Indiana looks like. So the typical house in, say, Maryville, Indiana, the active turnkey program, somebody was buying it for, say, 65. We were putting 35 into it, so they'd be into it about 100. And then the house was probably worth around 125, 130.
Okay.
Probably close. Yeah. So that's one number. Some of the numbers are a little higher, but basically you can understand, 80% is what they're normally into the house. So if a house is worth 100,000, they're into a house 80,000. But for better example's sake, the Maryville, Indiana market, most of my buyers are into about 100. That same house will rent for about $1,250, $1,295, $1,300.
Okay.
And in my opinion, their cap rates are 8.5, 9.5. Like they kind of range in those ranges as far as cap rates. Cash on cash return is all over the place depending on how you calculate it and how you want to go that. But I'm looking for like what I believe is how much money you have in the deal versus how much money you're going to start making. And we're really trying to push for 20%, cash on cash, how much money you have out versus how much money you're going to get in. Now, the active turnkey program is much higher than that 20%. And honestly, I've had investors have infinity return from day one because they get all their money back once they refinance.
Right.
So, I mean, that's really kind of like the dream scenario. And so I felt like if I could create a program that had so much value, my investors would come back to me over and over and over again. And they really have. Our active turnkey product now, if we have a house that goes for sale in the active turnkey program, we honestly send it to our list and it's sold sometimes within hours. Like seriously, Like it is. I mean, we've had houses sell in less than an hour. But the active turnkey program is I think, an extreme amount of value for our investors. And I've built 20, 30, 40 people, houses for several different people and in that exact program. And what they're seeing now too is, everybody, the one thing I want to make sure that if you're just getting into rental investing, and Michael, I promise you that you can attest to this, you cannot look at the rental portfolio and you cannot look at the rental and the return kind of in the first year. Like you cannot stop after the first year and be like, oh, this isn't a very good investment. If you're not in it for the long game, if you're not in this for like 5, 10, 20 years, then don't even get into rentals. If you're not going to be committed to the long term, then don't do it. But what I see, and I'm seeing this now, and it's kind of really exciting to me when I'm actually seeing investors when their eyes light up, and I tell them, hey, the house that you were into for $100,000 is now worth $180,000, and at the time it was only worth 130 or whatever, something like that, and they just like, and on top of that, it was renting for $1,250, and now it's renting for $1,350. That 30-year amortization schedule, when you start looking past year 7 and you start looking, on how much the rents have increased and how much your equity pay down is, it is like you can't even really put numbers to paper because you can't really explain it because it's almost too good to be true. And you couple that with the tax advantages that you get with real estate. And honestly, I don't know why anybody would put their money in the stock market. So,
amen.
That's just, I mean, and I'm a real estate guy. I've had investments in the stock market over years. And a lot of my investors came from the stock market world. And they're like, in 2008, I get hurt so bad that they say, I lost 50% of my portfolio in 2008. And I have a dentist from Michigan. That's one of my I think he's got 30 properties with us. And he's like, I lost so much money that even if I had a 50% return for the next 2 or 3 years, I lost so much money that a 50% return on 50% of my original portfolio doesn't even get me back to where I started from. So it's like, he's like, it's just insane. And not only that, the taxes that you pay when you have increases or gains in the stock market, if a house goes up in value, you don't have to pay that tax until you actually sell the property. And it's kind of crazy. I actually went to a single family office event in Miami a couple of weeks ago. And, the guys that I talked to there, and these are like very, very wealthy people, 100 million plus, or they're managers of people's money that have that kind of money. And the long-term thinking that they think about isn't even like 10, 20 years. They're thinking like generational, like they're like, why would I ever sell? He's like, we bought 1,000 homes. I talked to one guy. He said he bought 1,000 homes in Europe, mostly in Great Britain, and in the 50s. And he's like, why would I ever sell those properties? They're worth like 20 times what we paid for them. And not only that, they're all paid off. And he's like, I'm never thinking about how much I can, how much money I can make from selling a property or how much it's even worth. It's all about the cash flow and the long-term investment strategy that they have, and how can I pass this on to my kids and my kids' kids, and there's just so many advantages that come along with real estate, and I really love to be able to serve my investors That's our number one focus with the Olson Group is like, how can we serve our investors better? How can we give them the better product? How can we do little things like for instance, 2 years ago, we started putting granite in all of our houses. It's one of those things where like nobody else in my market's doing it. You know, you might have people in Fresno where you have rentals do it, but in our market, nobody does in rentals. It costs us about $600 to $800 more for a house. I get $50 more per month in rent. So you do the math. I mean, is anybody willing to take like 60% return on your money? I mean, I am.
Yeah.
So stuff like that, we're going to start actually putting in the phone charger little things in some of the plugs in the house. And people think, you know, it's so, you know, the renters are like, they think it's a luxury, you know, it costs us $10 for an extra, for a better plug than what you normally would have. We don't put them in every single plug in the house, but like a couple in the kitchen, a couple in the bed, and you know, one in the bedroom, each bedroom maybe. And you just think about it, just those little things can add so much value. And that's what we're trying to do for my own personal portfolio and for my investors. Like, how can I add more value to the renters? How can I add more value to my investors? And how can I build, you know, portfolios for people where in the long haul, I'm looking for people to kind of come with me in this long-term vision for Gary. And Gary, so let's kind of back up. I told you about the numbers outside of Gary. Well, the numbers inside of Gary, Northwest Indiana, look more like this. So if you're most of my, this is kind of the problem. The retail market for Gary, Indiana is $45,000 to $60,000 in most houses. That's the retail. There is no retail really. And I mean, I shouldn't say there is no, there is, it's coming back. And we've actually seen houses in those same neighborhoods sell for over $100,000 in the summer. And so no houses have traded in these areas for 10 years over 45, 50 grand. And all of a sudden we're seeing houses like spike immediately into the hundreds, which to me is like, I better get in now. And I better buy as many of these houses and, you know, now while it's still good.
Right.
But those houses that I'm all into for say 45 or 50, they rent between $750 and $850. And even sometimes as much as $900 a month. So that's the typical numbers. Those taxes are probably about $1,500, $1,600 a year. So if you want to do the math on your own calculators, you guys can kind of figure out, you know, property management's 10%, all the other things you guys can figure out with your maintenance or vacancy rates. So vacancy rates, I'm going to assume they're a little higher in Gary. And maintenance, I'm going to assume a little higher than what I would normally assume in some other markets around the area. But I think in the long haul, even if the cash flow is even, which I don't believe it will be, and my own personal portfolio will attest to that, I think the appreciation that we're going to see in Gary, Indiana, with all the new jobs coming and all the change that's happening, Gary, Indiana, I think is going to turn into a logistics town. Yeah. We just extended the runway 3 or 4 years ago at Gary, Indiana airport. And the runway at Gary, Indiana, at the Gary airport is actually longer than the runway at Midway in Chicago. So like they can get all the big planes in. There's a lot of construction happening right now as I speak on the actual airport grounds. A lot of companies are coming in saying, hey, we want a piece of this. And the future is happening. Like I can see it happen right in front of my eyes. And it's really exciting to kind of be a part of it and something I've been kind of talking about. And I'm still getting people telling me I'm wrong and, you know, it's never going to happen. And that's what it takes sometimes. It takes somebody to leap out on faith and say, you know what, I've been proving people wrong for my entire life and I don't plan on stopping now.
There you go. And I don't think you're wrong either. I wouldn't have reached out to you if I thought you were wrong. I think you're right. So much so that I plan to come and see what you're doing sometime in January, because I think you're right. I think I think the time is right now. I think, you know, there's a couple of things that are going to happen, right? Values are going to go up over time. And you're right. There could be a spike. But eventually what's going to happen is you're going to be able to go out and get just traditional loans, right? Most banks kind of frown upon the 50K or so loan below just because of the paperwork and the extra risk they take on. But eventually you're going to get to that.
That's something to think about, because the actual federal government is going to actually start forcing that back into play come January 1 of 2019. So we actually already have a local bank, Centier Bank here, that is actually already loaning in that lower than $50,000 price point. So it's again, all that stuff is happening today. Nice. Like everything that you just said, where you're going, like that is happening right now. And it's really exciting.
Because when that comes in and you get to that magic $80,000 kind of retail number, it kind of unlocks a bigger wave, right? Even more people come in, because then they go, hey, I have 20% or 25%, and, you know, they can go get a traditional, you know, FHA loan. So
Mhm.
wow, knowing what's coming January 1st, less than a week away, I think there's so much momentum that people watching this should type in Gary, Indiana, and look up the Olson Group and really see what's there. So far, we've done a lot of talking about houses. I'd be remiss if we didn't at least touch on small multifamilies, maybe duplex through quads or small apartments. Is that same kind of idea, or is that kind of stuff to stay away from, or where do you see that in your market?
Oh no, I mean, I'm all in when it comes to all the above. Really,
Okay.
like I'll do syndications with. It's just not my niche. My niche is probably single family. We actually just sold 2 or 3 plexes in the last 2 or 3 months. I actually have 10 duplexes that will be coming up live for turnkey in Hammond, Indiana. I think those numbers are like $90,000 for each duplex, and each side is like rented for $750 or something like that. So you do the math; it's really good numbers.
Yeah.
So like, I think obviously if you can get the duplexes, if you can get the 4, you have very many of them in our. So it's more of a bigger city type of deal.
Okay.
So like we do have duplexes, we do have 4 units that we kind of get our hands on. Our niche though is kind of just like our bread and butter is a single family rental portfolio.
Yeah.
But I'm all for those things. It's just kind of the location that I'm in. There's not as many of them available.
Yeah.
And we are looking at build to rent. We are looking at kind of new construction as an option as well. But I actually came from the new construction. My background's actually in construction.
Wow.
From the time I was 12 years old, I started working for my 8th grade history teacher all the way until, honestly, 2008 I worked only construction, for that period of time. I started with a construction management company. That's really kind of where my roots are in that. I actually have a book coming out. Josh, what did we decide to name it? Josh is in my office. Investors versus Contractors. That's the name of the book. About 100 pages, and it should be a good read, and kind of my take and my spin on, why I started this active turnkey program working for investors fixing and flipping. I would actually go out and help them find a property. I would work with a realtor to help them find a property. I would give them a whole scope of work before they bought the property. I'd tell them what it's going to be worth before they bought the property. And all I wanted out of the whole deal was to just get to do the contracting work.
Sure.
Like if you're an investor, right, Mike? If a contractor came to you, you'd be like, okay, what's this guy smoking?
Exactly.
He's like giving me everything, and all I have to do is give him some money, and he's going to make the whole deal happen. I actually did that for about 100 houses for 3 different investors in a 2-year period of time, back 2008, 2009. And that's kind of where I got the whole idea for my active turnkey program. I didn't realize how much value I was bringing to the market. So now we wholesale the properties to them.
Sure.
So I wasn't making any money on that front end at all.
Right.
And then we do the contracting work, and then we property manage for them on the back end. And we really just try to make it a full service. But active turnkey is kind of done with you, because you're taking the risk.
Right.
If something goes wrong, you're taking the exact same risk I would take as if I was buying the property myself to do it for myself. So that's just kind of like the difference between the 2 programs. I think there's a ton of value in regular turnkey because you can deploy a lot more money quicker.
Yeah.
If you're the type of person that has a lot more money, you can buy 16 houses, like really fast and actually be cash flowing immediately with, like $400,000, for instance, could basically get you 16 houses. I think it's about right? 4 houses per 100. Yeah. So, so if you're working with a smaller dollar amount, sometimes it's better to kind of churn that same money over and over again with the active turnkey program. But if you're working with a lot more money, and some of my investors do both, they'll use $200,000 and buy two active turnkeys, and they'll buy, 8 turnkeys and kind of get going with this. So something I always tell my investors is try to get to 10 as fast as you possibly can get. So then you can kind of start feeling like what this is really going to feel like and what these kind of numbers look like.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. Why don't we wrap this up and sort of talk about what you see sort of 3 to 5 years out? And why don't we just focus on Gary? Because I think that's what we're going to call this video. Where do you see this going? Lots of positives, lots of stuff coming. But
actually, I actually was questioned by a very smart guy a couple weeks ago about this strategy. So I'm not saying I'm rethinking it, but this is kind of what I'm going into Gary myself with lenders' money. So a lot of people that also buy rentals in out of state, they also find people like me and they loan their money to. And if I can give them 8 or 10%, like they're really happy with just getting 8 or 10%. They don't have to take the risk. I'm taking the risk. So, and I always feel like leadership means that you go first, but you kind of have to eat last, you know? So like with Gary, Indiana, for instance, I've been starting to build my own portfolio in Gary, Indiana, which I already had a portfolio outside of Gary before that, but I'm building in Gary, Indiana right now, currently myself with lender money. And my plan is to exit in 3 to 5 years. So like, that's my plan. So like, if you could tell how much I believe in it myself, because I'm going there first and I'm saying, I believe these houses that are worth 100 now in Miller Beach, for instance, I actually have vacation rentals in Miller Beach, which is actually a really nice area of Gary, right by Lake Michigan. And, I believe those houses I'm into 100, 125 are going to be worth 250, 300. Like you don't get houses a block from the beach for 100 grand. Like it's just, I don't care where you're at. It doesn't happen. So, you know, those houses, same thing with the 30, 40, $50,000 houses. I believe those houses are going to be worth 80, 90, $100,000. And I know I'm doing this, like I'm doing what everybody tells me not to do when it comes to don't like preach appreciation. Don't tell you it's going to happen. But when you see it happening in front of your eyes and you see the houses already selling for $100,000, I can't see why it wouldn't be $100,000 for every house. And I'm not looking to be the fix and flipper. I'm not looking to be the guy that pushes the, and I think there's a lot of value for the fix and flippers that kind of come into those neighborhoods and they push those values. They over improve the houses. I think there's value because they're adding value to the whole neighborhood, but I'm not that guy. I'm the guy that comes in, holds a rental portfolio longer term. And when every house is selling for $100,000 and I'm only into them 30 or 40 or 50, that's what I'm selling. I'm selling when every house, there's no house is selling for under $100,000. And I've been able to kind of take that, you know, the cash flow on the way up to be able to help pay the investor back and to be able to make some money on it. But I'll tell you, like, so I was questioned on that strategy at this single family summit. He's like, why would you do that? Like, if they're worth more money, they're going to be renting for more money. Why wouldn't you keep them? So now I'm thinking, well, maybe that might be a different, I may change my mind, but at least I'll tell you the one thing it does give me is if everything I'm saying comes true, it gives me a lot of options.
Yes. And
if everything I'm saying doesn't come true, I won't be any worse off than I am today because in my opinion, those houses are, the rents are going to continue to go up. So I'm already like, so for instance, I just finished a duplex where I think I'm into about 55. It's actually an lower duplex. It's not really like a side-by-side duplex that you normally see in most of our areas. But I think the downstairs unit is renting for 500 and the upstairs unit is renting for 675. And I'm into it like 45. You know, so like, again, like even if what I'm saying doesn't happen, I'm going to be just fine.
Yeah. Well, here's my prediction for you. Cause I'm actually going through it right now in my market in Fresno. So we bought a lot of stuff for the $40,000, $50,000 marks. And what we've decided to do after a 5-year run, maybe it's been 7 years, is instead of selling, which as you know is a tax inefficient strategy, we're going in and refining our small multi. So all our duplexes and tris and quads, and we're paying off a whole pile of single family homes. So we have more flexibility, right? So, and actually our payments are going down because like you, we use private money or hard money to buy these 40 and 50 and 60K homes. So now our interest rates are going down, our payments are going down, rents have gone up 30%, and I have a bunch of free and clear houses. Not a bad day, right? So
yeah, exactly. And at the end of the day, I love what you're doing because you're leveraging more, but you actually have free and clear. So like the free and clears then give you the flexibility. If all hell comes loose and everything goes crazy, they can't take those paid off houses.
Nope.
And if the paid house, you know what I'm saying? Like so leverage the other ones to the max as much as you possibly can, and then pay off a portion of your portfolio. I love that strategy for long-term thinking.
Yeah. And I think that's coming your way in 3 to 5 years because you're going to look at selling these 50, you know, taking a 50K hit or, you know, capital gains. You'll be like, nope, I'll just leverage those up, pay those off and do it again. So I see that coming your way.
Yeah. The other thing to look at too is half of Gary, Indiana is opportunity zone. So if everybody's interested in that, well, that is a whole nother play. Yeah. So keep that in mind as well. I'm still trying to figure out the opportunity zone thing. I thought it was for all cash, but I didn't realize it's only for 1031 money coming into the opportunity zones. So that kind of like changes what my original thought was about the whole opportunity zone thing. But I think that's actually part of what I believe is boosting the economy in Gary, Indiana, because it's also for business. So if a business comes into an opportunity zone, they can also not have capital gain when they go to sell their business. So we just had a steel manufacturer come from Illinois, and they're moving their whole facility right into Gary, Indiana, because of a lot of that and the tax advantages of the state itself, and just the I think the logistics are easier here too. We're, like I said, we're right on Lake Michigan, so we have waterways which are connected to all of the Great Lakes, which also connect to Mississippi River. You also have the airport, and you have 8094 that goes east and west, coast to coast. I-65 goes all the way south to the Gulf of Mexico.
Wow.
So you have all four types of transportation. Oh, trains. Don't even get me started on how many trains are out here. So we have like every type of logistic way you can get in and out from, all four major ways to travel in this area as well.
Very, very cool. Well, I want to make sure we close out and turn the mic over to you and sort of just share what you want, inspiration, how to get a hold of you, what your ideal investor looked like, whatever you'd like. The floor is yours. Share away.
I know it's hard for me to kind of ask for things. I don't really go that way. Normally, I just want to just tell people to focus on their number one, their purpose in life. Like, what is I feel like everybody ought to be prepping all the time. PREP. Every day we ought to go figure out what is our purpose. Like, why am I doing what I'm doing? I think that's the most important thing. You always should be thinking about, like, why am I here on this earth for my whole life? Why am I living? We go through seasons in life, like right now I've got kids. So part of my purpose has to be in my kids. That's kind of why I do some of what I do. Ministry, what I do for others is part of my purpose. So the first P is purpose. R is responsibility. What is your responsibility to do today? It's kind of like my to-do list, like, what are my responsibilities? What I got to do today? And in order to fulfill that purpose, what are the things that some things are God-given responsibilities, like children, for instance, like nobody else can be the father of my children other than me. And I've got to make sure that I have to take care of those responsibilities first. Some of the responsibilities I give to myself, and some responsibilities I probably should give away to somebody else. E is encouragement, exhortation. Like, we should always be trying to figure out how can we be encouraged, and how can we encourage other people, and how can we exhort people? How can we influence them to do good works and to do better and to help people? And then P, what are you really passionate about? How am I going to grow every day? What are the disciplines in my life I need to keep away from me? What are the things I need to put boundaries up? And I think that a lot of growth happens by putting boundaries up. It's not just about like growing a tree, but like it's actually like putting those boundaries up. And how do I water myself? How do I keep that passion flowing every day? And those are kind of like it goes right along with our core values of charity, stewardship, community, and growth. They're the exact same line by line, PREP. And that's kind of what I would just, if you ask me what I want to leave with people, focus on your purpose, own your responsibilities, encourage as many people as you possibly can, and challenge them and support as many people as you possibly can. Be that steward, and have a passion to grow in everything that you do every single day. Because if you're not growing, you are dying.
Absolutely. Well, let's not forget to ask, if somebody watches this and wants to get a hold of your group, look at Active Turnkey, or maybe just buying turnkey properties, how would they reach out to you or your company?
I'll just give out my email address for that. We are building the website, olsongroup.com. I don't think that's quite, I know we own it, but I don't think that's there. olsongroupnetwork.com is where that would be. I think Olson Group, we are building an email list, and we also have Facebook there, but those are kind of all in the works. We are building actually a podcast around the whole turnkey for Active Turnkey. A podcast is what it'll be called. I think activeturnkey.com is still available, but we're kind of moving that around. Goodsuccess.com is really where the education company's at, and that's kind of where you can find out more about that. My personal email, though, is tolson, OLSON, at goodsuccess.com, and that's a perfect way to get a hold of me if anybody ever wants to get a hold of me. And honestly, I'll give out my cell phone because I don't really care. As long as you're not a telemarketer, then you have my full right to text me anytime. 219-742-7957. And like I said, no telemarketers. So if you're not a telemarketer, then you're allowed to text me or call. So I appreciate you letting me be on. I would love to have as many people as would like to come to the Community Go-Giver, come to the Community Go-Giver, and that is communitygogiver.com. And you can learn more about that. Right now, I think we still have early bird pricing. So if people wanted to save a couple $100 on that, they could jump on there. And then Josh, is the Active Turnkey book still available?
On Amazon.
Okay, so the Active Turnkey book is available on Amazon. We actually did have a free offer that we just stopped. So
Very good. Very good.
if somebody does want a copy of that, if they'll email me and ask me for a copy of that, I will send them a copy of that.
All right. Very cool. Well, I appreciate you giving us time. I love what you're doing. I see a very bright future for you. So I'm glad we made this happen. Thank you for your time.
Thanks for having me on, Michael. I appreciate everything that you're doing with helping people invest in real estate, build a portfolio, one house at a time. Is that what you're doing?
Yeah. One rental at a time. Exactly.
There you go. One rental at a time. I love that. And I think that's really the right way to do it.
Very cool.